Welcome to Star Wars The Story Of, where I take a piece of the grand Star Wars universe and analyze it in great detail. For today's topic, we are going to take a look at something that, although is very prevalent in the Star Wars universe, may be unknown by some Star Wars fans: the Sith Rule of Two. The Rule of Two, meaning there can only be two true Sith Lords at any one time. Believe it or not, the Rule of Two is incredibly crucial to the survival of the Sith, so much so that the lack of it could destroy them outright. So why does the Rule of Two contain so much power and significance? Let's get into the specifics and find out. It all began with Darth Revan. Darth Revan was once a young Jedi that had been unwillingly forced to the dark side, only to transition back and forth between the light and dark over the course of his very long life. When the dark consumed him, Revan became a very hardened and dispassionate man, which many believe is what made him into such a brilliant strategist and tactician. This dispassion left him free to criticize both the Jedi and Sith Order, as he held foresight and had no bias or attachment to either of their inherent philosophies. Through much pondering and studies, Revan realized that if elements were taken from the Jedi Order and implemented into the Sith Order, the Sith may become more prosperous as a result. At this time, the Sith Order was quite similar to the Jedi, with a large amount of individual Sith that were trained in the masses, but differently from the Jedi, they would constantly find themselves in engagements with each other. Revan saw that the Sith were struggling with this system because the Sith ideology conflicted with the way they were currently operating. He saw that the system in place for the Jedi was not inherently fit to confide with that of the Sith. The Sith were creatures riddled with arrogance and pride, with members that wanted nothing more than to call themselves all-powerful and all-knowing, while never truly obtaining real power or knowledge, and never understanding what they truly fought for, wanting domination but not willing to work as a unit to achieve it. Revan saw that while the Jedi Order was also large in scale, it was filled with warriors that had a common goal and fought for something greater than themselves. He believed that the only way to help the Sith become better and move past this crippling flaw was to get them to act in a similar manner to the Jedi, working and fighting as an organization rather than individuals. But how would Revan remedy this flaw without changing the Sith ideology? Revan came to the conclusion that the only way to solve this problem was to reduce the Sith in numbers. Less Sith would mean more power and force potential for individual Sith, and a smaller group with more power is in many ways better equipped than a large group with less. If each Sith had more power, they would also be more satisfied with their own abilities, not completely satisfied with them, as they would always desire to better themselves in strength and knowledge, but enough to stop the destructive fighting between themselves. Although Darth Revan created this concept, he would never live long enough to enforce it. Revan did, however, leave his teachings on a holocron for future Sith to learn from, and hopefully fix the inherent flaw of the Sith. Approximately 1,000 years later in the Sith's history, there was an even larger collection of Sith, known as the Brotherhood of Darkness. Things had failed to change, even with the knowledge left behind by Revan. The Sith had even become far more destructive than before, not to the likes of the Jedi, but still themselves. Infighting had become rampant, and the Sith were slowly destroying themselves from within, due to widespread ignorance, arrogance, and disobedience. There was a clear lack of order, with no one to claim it. It looked as if the Sith were experiencing its last days. The infighting and lack of order would go on, until one very powerful and knowledgeable man stepped up. This man was known as Darth Bane. Darth Bane had ventured off from the other Sith and studied Revan's holocron, coming to the realization Revan had many years prior. Bane, being the intellect that he was, saw that the Sith would go on to destroy themselves if nothing were to change, and worked to find a way to enforce Revan's past teachings and warnings. Bane eventually was not only able to find a way to put Revan's concepts to work, but he was also able to refine it, making it stronger, putting a new order in place called the Rule of Two, where a Dark Lord of the Sith and their apprentice would rule exclusively, reducing the numbers of Sith in the galaxy to only 2. Bane saw Revan's idea as genius, but not drastic enough, thinking that the overhaul of the Sith needed to be on a massive scale in order to truly succeed. Only having 2 Sith would mean that there would be an unbelievable amount of power between them, and make all other Force users seem so much lesser in comparison. Bane would finally enact his great plan and purge the Sith, removing all the Sith in the galaxy save himself, and successfully destroying a large amount of Jedi as well. Darth Bane would then go on to rule as the sole Sith Lord, eventually taking on an apprentice, Darth Zana, effectively saving the Sith from utter destruction, and setting a new path for victory and triumph over the Jedi. Bane was clear to his apprentice that they now held a considerable amount of power, and the way to fuel it was through hatred, and to make the Jedi Order a target for that hatred. Bane effectively taught his apprentice to hate the Jedi, but also themselves, creating a cycle of power and success. This would keep the Sith hungry for power, for only through the pursuit of gaining power would the Rule of Two prove successful. This did not mean, however, that the Sith would go outright and attack their enemies. No, times had shifted, and the Sith went into hiding, biding their power and time until the moment would arise for them to seize the galaxy as their own. Now, while this new rule may seem like a way just to eliminate competition, it's really a way to ensure the Sith's survival. The Rule of Two is brilliantly set up to play on the Sith's strengths and weaknesses. The Rule of Two states that there can only be two Sith, no more, no less, a Sith Lord and his apprentice. One to harness the power and one to crave it. This system was designed to keep both Sith on their toes, as the Sith apprentice would always desire the power of their master, and the master would always crave power inherently, wishing to obtain more and also motivated to remain above their apprentice. In almost every case, the Sith apprentice would find an opportunity to kill their master, taking their place as the new Lord of Darkness, and later claim an apprentice of their own, thus continuing the vicious cycle of the Rule of Two. In some cases, we can see Sith getting eager to harness this power, prompting them to break the Rule of Two. Most notably when Darth Sidious went behind Darth Plagueis' back and began training a new apprentice in the form of Darth Maul. Sidious, however, never used Maul to destroy Plagueis, doing that on his own behalf. This process would continue for all Sith until they finally found the apprentice that would become more powerful than themselves and thus take over, claiming the mantle of Dark Lord for themselves. At this moment, you may be asking yourself, why would the Sith subscribe to the rules of this system that could very well mean their ultimate destruction? What I believe the answer to this question is that although the Sith do show off an incredibly selfish persona and pursue nothing more than their own personal power, most Sith, through the new rule and mindset created by the Rule of Two, have an underlying loyalty to the dark side and what they fight for on a grander scale. This was a trait the Sith of old lacked that was founded by the creation of the Rule of Two. Revan realized that the Jedi had a cause greater than themselves, and thought a system with fewer Sith could operate without excessive fighting, and could also give the Sith something greater to fight for as well. The Sith no longer just desired their own power to come to fruition, but they wanted to see the success of the dark side overall, and see the entire galaxy cloaked in utter darkness. They accepted that their own destruction was proof that they had failed, and that the progress of the dark side and the Sith overall would be left in better hands than their own. Their murderers would prove to be stronger than themselves, and earned the right to further the cause on their own instead. The process in a way also breeds a higher power for the Sith, for when each apprentice kills the master, the more powerful or cunning of the two progresses. This is why, as we get further through Star Wars history, we can see exceedingly more powerful Dark Lords until the very end of Return of the Jedi. It's a tragic, yet functional passing of the torch. In few points in the Star Wars universe has the Rule of Two not been enforced, and when not done so usually does not bode well for the Sith that chose to stray. Only twice do we know of the Sith renouncing the Rule of Two and trying to conquer single-handedly. The first being Darth Plagueis, who when he killed his master Darth Tenebris told him that he would unlock the secret to immortality, ending the Rule of Two and ruling the galaxy by himself forever. This would, however, never come to fruition, as he would later seek the apprenticeship of Darth Sidious and never learn the secret to eternal life. The second being Darth Krayt, when he deemed himself so powerful that he put an end to the Rule of Two and created his own new rule, the Rule of One. The Rule of One Sith, meaning there could be more than two Sith, but that they all undyingly served the goals of a single ruling Sith Lord. Krayt would later go on to seek information and guidance from an ancient Sith holocron infused with Darth Bane's essence, and the past Sith Lord did not approve of the new ideology of Krayt. Krayt was told by Darth Bane and other dark forces that this new rule that he started would not only mean the end of him, but the end of the Sith Order itself. This, although, would not prove itself to be the case, for when Darth Krayt died, the Sith would go on to survive. These two cases show that the Sith best operate under the Rule of Two, and when abandoned, it leaves the Sith in a state of vulnerability. Only when the Rule of Two is active can the Sith truly prosper, simply because the nature of the Sith is so inherently destructive that it has to have room to destroy itself and rebuild. If given too much room to destroy itself, it can go down a path of destruction so intense that nothing survives, or if not given any room to destroy itself, it will just implode with nothing to take its place. I leave you with this. In canon, it seems as if the Order of the Sith died with Darth Sidious and Darth Vader on the second Death Star, as Snoke and Kylo are not Sith. But ultimately, the Rule of Two achieved its goal of dominating the galaxy. Darth Sidious was the culmination of the Rule of Two, and the final step in many that gave control over the galaxy back to the guise of the Sith. The Rule of Two ultimately served its final purpose, and for nearly 2 decades, the Sith Order ruled unrivaled and unchallenged, succeeding in wiping out nearly all the Jedi and holding control over the Senate. The Rule of Two is a brilliant concept and excellent fix to a problem that plagued the Sith for thousands of years prior to its inception. So tell me how you feel about the Rule of Two, and if you think it makes complete sense. As a side note, who is your favorite Rule of Two era Sith Lord? Thank you so much for watching, may the Force be with you, and have a great day.